Hello, I am Dr. Mirela Cernăianu, and I welcome you to the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast, the WOW MD podcast. I am not your typical wellness coach, and this is not a typical wellness podcast. Here, I'll discuss educational facts about health, hormones, intimacy, anti-aging, and beauty trends, all very hot topics, to empower you to make great choices when it comes to your health and to your body. I want you to go, wow, I did not know that. Or, wow, this is going to make a great difference for me. Our healthcare system is broken and it needs a revolution. You and I can start one today. I am willing to share my knowledge with the world if you're willing to listen. Let's get started. Welcome, listener, for another episode of the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast. I decided to take a break in the series about hormones. And before I dive into testosterone for women and men, I'd like to take a break. And I did this podcast because a lot of women and men that I see on a regular basis in my practice have significantly difficulty losing weight. So I wanted to do a podcast about why we cannot lose weight. Now, I don't promise to shed light on your specific issue, but I promise to inform you and give you some very useful, valuable facts that might help you shed light or at least point you in the right direction. Weight gain is the single most bothersome health issue that many of my patients and a very large amount of women and men in the United States are faced with. So why is it so impossible to lose weight? What is the key thing that we are missing? And what does suddenly happen? What no longer suddenly works normal in our body and leads to this weight gain that cannot be reversed? So the question is, what happens in our bodies that suddenly makes us gain weight? It's like a switch being flipped for many men and women. And in a matter of sometimes a few months and sometimes a few years, a significant amount of weight, anywhere from 10 to 30 pounds or more, starts accumulating. And I hear this complaint on a daily basis for at least 30 to 40% of the patients. So why is it so difficult for doctors, nutritionists, health life coaches, personal trainers, weight loss specialists to find the real reason that is behind your very own personal weight gain? And there is no specific answer, but I'm going to try and shed some light and point you in the right direction like I promised at the beginning. And even if you're a fit person that has a healthy body mass index, I'm sure you'd like to know the answer to these questions to at least take some steps in the right direction. Again, 1 ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So the problem to why we cannot lose weight and why we don't have a simple answer is because there is no simple answer. I address this issue with many women and men on a regular basis, and I seriously wish I had a simple answer for every single one of them. If it was that easy, my practice would be flooded with patients and I would become a very, very rich celebrity overnight. So what I like to do with this podcast is review some of the complicated factors that need to be taken into consideration when we address weight gain. This is not a podcast where I'm going to talk about what kind of diet would be best for you or what kind of exercise regimen you should follow. If diet and exercise was all it took, many of us would be very successful at achieving and maintaining weight loss. I do want to touch on lifestyle factors like diet and exercise. Are your lifestyle factors important? Of course. Maybe not so much the amount of calories you eat, but more like the quality of the food that you eat. Now, usually I get faced with two possibilities here. You might be someone who believes you eat a perfect diet and you eat great and exercise a lot, and you're still frustrated because you cannot lose weight. Well, I'd like to tell you that there is no such thing as a perfect diet, because the majority of us like comfort, consistency, and convenience. which means we tend to eat reliably about the same type of food over and over again. And that by itself could be a big problem. Eating the same type of food over and over with regularity and consistency can lead to food sensitization. More on that later in possibly a future episodes of the podcast. This is not about gut health, but gut health is important. I just wanted to introduce this concept here. If you're stuck and cannot lose weight, please don't get frustrated. Yes, you might be eating a perfect diet and a very healthy diet at that, but keep in mind, it might not be the best diet for you. What about exercise? Are you exercising daily, regularly, staying fairly active throughout the day? Are you frustrated that you spent over an hour at the gym doing all the right things and your weight is not budging? Well, if you are fairly active and exercising on a regular basis, you should be frustrated. Please know that exercise is important in achieving and maintaining a healthy weight, but is there such a thing as too much exercise? Let me repeat that. Is there such a thing as too much exercise? Is it possible that exercising either too much or the wrong type of exercise for your body can actually get you stuck in your weight loss quest? Well, the answer to these last questions is yes. There is such a thing as exercising too much, and there is such a thing as exercising the wrong type of exercise for your body. Well, how would you know? Ideally, a comprehensive functional medicine doctor or a really well-versed, educated, holistic wellness coach will look at the big picture, will talk to you for a few hours, analyze some markers, and give you that feedback. This is not necessarily something that would come to you intuitively, but if you're doing the same thing over and over again and you're not getting results, that's a clear sign that something needs to change. So to sum it up, in other words, if you're eating that perfect diet and exercising perfectly at least an hour a day and you cannot lose weight, clearly something's not right with these two lifestyle factors, your diet and your exercise, and there are other things at play. It's probably time to have that in-depth evaluation and discussion with someone that can shed some light on what is happening specifically for you. So obviously, the previous discussion was geared towards people who are doing the best they can to maintain or lose weight, and it's very difficult. We should have a totally different conversation if you're more a sedentary type and not exercising on a daily basis. We should have a totally different conversation if your diet consists of mainly eating out a lot, snacking throughout the day, eating late dinners, rarely skipping dessert, indulging cravings for sugar or salt on a regular basis, etc. Clearly, there's room to work with someone like this as far as diet and exercise. And that's where your nutritionist or health coach will come in handy. This is where a personal trainer can help. All of them are expensive, but they could be motivating. And the million-dollar question to ask here, let's say you're not very active, you're more sedentary, and it's mainly because you're not really motivated or you're very tired and you can't exercise. So the million-dollar question is, what makes you not motivated to exercise? What makes you so fatigued or tired that you do not have enough energy to want to exercise? Another million-dollar question is, what makes you have all those cravings? And what makes you give in to all the bad foods you clearly know are bad for you, but you keep eating them anyway? Maybe, again, having a comprehensive wellness functional medicine evaluation that looks at the big picture and gives you some answers before you decide to spend a lot of money on a wellness coach program might be the right thing to do. Otherwise, you will be successful. It will be a short-term success, and those things will come again to the forefront of your health and bog you down again. And here you are with the yo-yo dieting. You lose weight, you gain it back, you lose again, you gain it back till you actually give up and get very upset and depressed. The point I'm trying to make is that diet and exercise are very useful and valuable tools in achieving and maintaining a healthy weight. But it's not about the diet and exercise. Ideally, your doctor should know that and address this issue with you in a totally different manner rather than tell you that you need to eat less and exercise more. But you do hear that all the time when you go to the doctor and address the weight issue. So there's a major thing that's being overlooked, especially if you're over 40, and that's stress hormones and gut health issues and inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction. And I'm going to touch on all of these throughout the podcast. Let's start with hormones. I mentioned before in the introduction to body's hormones, how many hormones are related to maintaining a healthy weight. I discussed all these hormones earlier, but let's review some of them briefly because they're much more important for our weight than we know. The number one most important hormone for our weight is going to be insulin. Obviously, there could be quite a few podcasts about insulin. This is not the topic of the podcast, so I will be brief. The main problem with insulin is insulin resistance, which means the insulin receptor is broken. I did approach this issue in some of my previous podcasts, but the key issue we need to address and the key question we need to ask is why the insulin receptor suddenly is not working anymore. And sometimes it's not suddenly, it just creeps up on you. Are we seriously going to blame it on diet and exercise? Again, yes, low-carb diet, keto diet, and exercise can improve insulin resistance. But it's not going to fix the receptor problem if lifestyle factors are not what caused it. So let's talk about what are some of the key factors or factor that can cause and contribute to insulin resistance. Well, the number one is actually inflammation. So let's talk about inflammation for a second, and then I'll come back to the hormones involved in weight management. When we think inflammation, we think something that's swollen, hot, tender, and red. Usually inflammation is localized, and it's a response the body initiates to fix an insult. What is not being talked about as widely as it should is widespread inflammation of the body, or metaflammation, that's chronic low-level inflammation that has spread throughout the body. So in simple terms, your body's on fire. There are signs and symptoms that would tell you if you suffer from metaflammation. For example, foggy brain is a sign your brain is inflamed and you have what we call brain on fire. Or if you have chronic widespread joint pain and stiffness and chronic random on and off muscular aches, that means your musculoskeletal system is on fire. If you suffer from heart palpitations or arrhythmias, you might have chest discomfort and shortness of breath that occur randomly for no reason, and your cardiologist says there's nothing wrong with your heart after doing a bunch of tests, well, your heart might be on fire. Do you have a decreased kidney function without any obvious reason? Your kidneys might be on fire. And I can go on and on like this. But I don't want to forget, if you have some random inconsistent digestive symptoms like occasional heartburn, sometimes constipation, sometimes diarrhea, sometimes bloating, you have occasional pain when you eat certain foods, your gut and intestinal lining might be on fire. So again, you have signs and symptoms that tell you that there's widespread inflammation. You don't necessarily need to see a doctor for that or have tests. But many people are not in touch with their bodies and they don't pay attention to things like that. So coming back to inflammation, inflammation is a natural response that is designed to protect the body and to initiate a healing process. However, in many circumstances, chronic, ongoing inflammation contributes to the development and progression of disease and many health conditions, including obesity. So uncovering the possible cause of chronic inflammation is crucial in achieving wellness and a healthy weight. I'm going to come back to my hormones, but I want to touch bases on inflammation again because this podcast is not about inflammation. But I would like to mention some of the situations that could cause chronic ongoing inflammation that leads to weight problems. that might be overlooked and not addressed or asked. Number 1, chronic infections caused by bacteria, viruses, parasites, or yeast will trigger a self-perpetuating immune response and will cause ongoing chronic low-grade inflammation. The best example for that is Lyme disease or chronic Epstein-Barr infections, chronic mono, chronic mold exposure, or repetitive bacterial infections, for example, for sinus infections or tonsillitis that require multiple courses of antibiotics. So that's one cause of inflammation. Number 2, autoimmune disorders. Autoimmune disorders are a dysfunctional response that the immune system develops when it comes in contact with foreign antigens. It should develop an immune response. However, when it's dysfunctional, our immune system mistakenly develops an immune response against our own tissues. And this is either an antibody immune response or with certain killer cells that attack our tissues. Conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, Hashimoto's are just a few examples. Number 3 cause for inflammation is injury or trauma that heals with excessive pathological fibrosis, causing chronic pain and delayed healing. Number 4 cause for chronic inflammation are chronic allergies caused by, again, a dysfunctional immune response and a persistent mast cell activation and histamine release. Number 5, chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart failure, inflammatory bowel disease like IBD, IBS, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, high blood pressure, chronic kidney dysfunction, etc., will generate an ongoing low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Number 6, toxic environmental exposure to certain irritants like cigarette smoke, chemicals, alcohol, hormone disruptors, toxic metals can cause chronic inflammation in the organs that are exposed, like the lungs, the digestive tract, or the skin, then spreading throughout the body like wildfire, causing widespread inflammation. Number 7, persistent ongoing stress can and will trigger excessive activation of the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, our HPA axis, leading to chronic, exaggerated release of stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, perpetuating a low-grade inflammation over time. Number 8, and again, this is one of the last, but definitely not the least, our diet choices, consisting of processed foods, unhealthy fats, excessive sugar, etc., can and will generate persistent low-grade inflammation throughout the body. And number 9, let's not forget genetic predispositions, as some individuals are much more susceptible to inflammation due to certain mutations. One of the most famous is MTHFR mutation. And many individuals have a certain predisposition that runs genetically in families for certain autoimmune disorders. So if you suffer from inflammation and it's not being addressed, you can eat a perfect diet and have a perfect exercise regimen, or what you think is perfect. You will not be able to lose weight. Inflammation will keep you stuck. There are many markers in the body that can be tested to give your doctor an idea whether or not you suffer from inflammation. But if you suffer from any of the signs and symptoms that I mentioned earlier, please be suspicious that inflammation might be a problem that's keeping you from losing weight. So how do we address inflammation? Well, we have to fix what caused the inflammation, and we need to make sure that the cause for the inflammation that affects your body specifically is addressed. And we also have to work to bring back the body towards a natural healing that promotes wellness rather than a persistent inflammatory survival response. I highly recommend you read a book called The Survival Paradox. It specifically addresses how our natural healing processes can go rogue, creating persistent inflammation, leading to chronic illness, obesity, chronic fatigue, and ultimately cancer. So enough about inflammation. Let's go back to insulin. I started this whole side note onto inflammation because I wanted to tell you that insulin resistance is caused by inflammation. Insulin is primarily responsible for regulating blood glucose levels. When food intake increases, in specifically carbohydrate-rich foods, the pancreas will make insulin that will store the energy from these carbohydrates into our cells for future use. Imagine our metabolic pathways as highways and the molecules of carbohydrates as cars, zooming along these highways. Insulin is the traffic coordinator of these metabolic highways. Insulin manages the flow of carbohydrates, glucose or sugar, into our cells, where it will be converted into energy. Persistent high sugar, high fat diet will lead to our cells becoming more and more resistant. It will be pushing the pancreas to produce more insulin, and more insulin will lead to insulin resistance, weight gain, and likely diabetes. Enough about insulin. What other hormones do we have out there that are crucial in weight management? Another major hormone is cortisol. Cortisol has a very important role in weight management. Cortisol is also known as the stress hormone. Cortisol increases during periods of intense emotional or physical stress. High cortisol levels will increase appetite, and high cortisol is known to lead to increased blood sugar levels, weight gain, which leads to insulin resistance, high blood pressure, excess fat deposition around our midsection, etc. The insulin resistance caused by cortisol leads to more high blood sugar and more weight gain, which creates a vicious cycle between cortisol and insulin. Both of these hormones will have to be addressed and looked into if you want to achieve meaningful weight loss. Well, what about our thyroid hormones? Thyroid hormones play a major role in the regulation of metabolic processes in our bodies. Thyroid hormones determine our metabolic rate. They determine how we utilize the foods we eat, either for fuel or for storage as fat. Our thyroid hormones determine whether we burn carbs or we burn fat. Very important. Please stay tuned as I will dedicate more podcasts in the future to thyroid, which is such an important master regulator hormone. But what I want you to take home from this podcast is that conventional medicine and endocrinologists alike do not address thyroid comprehensively. They look at thyroid function and order testing that is very limited and of very little value in helping decide for the appropriate course of action, and in many, many cases, completely fail to diagnose thyroid dysfunction. So keep that in mind. If you're told by a doctor your thyroid has been checked and is normal, they most likely just looked at TSH or free T4. Ask about free T3. Ask about reverse T3. Ask about having your antibodies for Hashimoto thyroiditis tested. Let's keep going. What are the other hormones that are also important for weight gain? Well, what about leptin and ghrelin? These might be names that you have never heard before, or you might have heard them somewhere. Let me shed some light onto what they are. Leptin is produced by the fat cells. It's a hormone that tells the brain we are full. Leptin sends signals to the hypothalamus in the brain to suppress appetite. So leptin is an appetite suppressor. It sounds like a great hormone to have plenty of. However, we often develop leptin resistance. That is when the brain does not respond to leptin anymore. So the leptin is not able to suppress appetite, which leads to a vicious circle of increased appetite, overeating, and weight gain. Ghrelin is the opposite of leptin. It's the hunger hormone. It stimulates appetite, which will lead to an increase in food intake and will promote fat storage. It is produced in the stomach and the pancreas. Obviously, we want more leptin and less ghrelin, and the body should normally keep a good balance between these two. However, that's all done in the brain. And if that balance is off and the brain receptors are broken, then these two hormones will not work well. More on that in the future. What about growth hormone? Well, growth hormone production declines with age. That's a really well-known established fact. By age 50 to 60, a very large majority of adults will suffer from growth hormone deficiency. Growth hormone is a major anabolic hormone that helps us stay fit and lean, promotes muscle mass, and it is involved in muscle growth and repair after exercise or injury. It is one of the major regulators for our body's composition. Growth hormone promotes the loss of fat tissue, favoring development of lean muscle mass. If you're over the age of 50 and suffer from weight issues, please ask to have your growth hormone levels tested. Last but not least, what about our sex hormones? I keep coming back to sex hormones because I love them so much, and I always save the best for last. What about estrogen for women? Is estrogen good for us or bad for us? I'm sure you already know the answer. I told you that in the previous podcasts. And if you didn't listen to my previous podcast, please go back and listen. Estrogen is an awesome hormone for us women. And when we have the right amount and the right balance of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, we are able to lose weight and diet very easily. As soon as this balance is altered and off-kilter, suddenly our efforts have to double or triple to maintain the weight we have. We find that we now need to eat less and exercise more to just keep the weight off. Gone are the days when we could have starved ourselves easily and lost a large amount of weight in a few weeks for a few months. Who hasn't done that when they were young? We could overindulge, and we knew that we get back on a diet, the weight will come off. That's no longer possible as we get older. Estrogen is a double-edged sword. Estrogen has a very complex relationship with our metabolism and our weight. Estrogen controls our body's energy expenditure, our appetite, and food intake. So maintaining optimal estrogen level is key when it comes to estrogen management. Both high estrogen and low estrogen levels can and will lead to weight problems. Estrogen helps regulate our metabolic rate, the speed at which the body converts food and drinks into energy. When estrogen levels decline during perimenopause, so will the metabolic rate. Our body becomes less efficient in burning calories. Testosterone in men does the same thing. Estrogen affects how the body uses and stores fat. When estrogen is low in women or testosterone is low in men, there may be a tendency to store more fat around the abdomen rather than hips and thighs for women. Low estrogen levels in women and low testosterone levels in men can lead to an increased appetite and cravings, which will predispose to weight gain. Lower estrogen in perimenopause and the complete absence of estrogen after menopause, as well as low testosterone in men, will lead to mood changes, especially depression and anxiety. And these mood changes will affect your appetite and your exercise level. It would also lead to lower energy levels, which would lead to decreased physical activity, poor eating habits, and increased risk for weight gain. Estrogen in women and testosterone in men can help modulate insulin sensitivity, which we saw is a crucial hormone for proper weight management. Estrogen and testosterone generally enhance insulin sensitivity, meaning they both help the body's cells respond adequately to insulin, allowing the glucose from the blood to enter the cells efficiently. Interestingly, a deficiency in estrogen in women and a deficiency of testosterone in men can and will lead to insulin resistance, where the body's cells will stop responding properly to insulin, causing elevated blood sugar levels and increasing risk of diabetes and weight gain around the midsection. Estrogen and testosterone both act through receptors for estrogen and testosterone, And these receptors are spread throughout various body tissues. They're in the muscle, in the liver, in the fat. And this showcases how both estrogen and testosterone can and will modulate the action of insulin, cortisol, or growth hormones, because there's abundant receptors in the tissues where all the other receptors for the other hormones are as well. Estrogen, and likely testosterone as well, has anti-inflammatory properties. And we know that chronic inflammation leads to muscle breakdown and an increase in fat tissue. So by reducing inflammation, our sex hormones have a protective effect and can help us manage our weight better. So I don't want to get stuck in the estrogen and testosterone loop. I will keep talking about these two hormones forever if I could. But keep in mind, there's many things that estrogen does for a woman's body and testosterone does for a man's body that indirectly affect weight. So I'll stop here as far as where hormones go, and we can pick it up later in other podcasts. What you do need to remember is that hormones play a crucial role in weight management, and their complex interplay and interactions can significantly impact our body's weight and metabolism. Keep in mind, disruptions in one hormone can lead to imbalances in the others, impacting appetite, impacting regulation of energy expenditure and fat storage. Also, individual differences in genetics and existing underlying medical conditions will further complicate this interplay of hormones in weight management. So if you suffer from diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, autoimmune disease, all of that matters. And it all needs to be taken into consideration when you're trying to look for successful long-term weight loss. Coming back, what leads to weight gain and why can we lose weight? We talked about inflammation as a major disruptor of insulin sensitivity and a key mechanism for weight gain. We talked about all the body's hormones and this complex interplay between them that needs to be addressed. So clearly, we have to look at inflammation. We have to diagnose it, address it. We have to look at the hormones. But what else is out there that's being overlooked and not discussed? Well, you might have heard of this, or this is the first time you hear about it, but it's called mitochondrial dysfunction. What is mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, as the name indicates, the mitochondria is often referred to as the powerhouse or the engine of every cell in the body. We need these mitochondria head to toe, inside and out. Our entire body needs them. Our mitochondria will need to produce the energy required for the proper functioning of any specific cell, whether it's a brain cell, a heart cell, an ovarian or testicular cells, an adrenal cell, a liver cell, a fat cell, a muscle cell, or a skin cell covering your toes. So how does the mitochondria become dysfunctional? Well, many environmental toxins can damage and interfere mitochondrial function. Heavy metals, pesticides, industrial chemicals, plasticizers will lead to the damage of the mitochondrial membrane, impairing its energy-generating capabilities. Chronic stress will interfere and affect mitochondrial normal function through the overproduction of stress hormones and free radicals, and this will lead to mitochondrial damage. Chronic infections, especially certain viruses, parasites, and bacteria, are very prone to damaging the mitochondria. And on top of that, the development of mitochondrial dysfunction will likely contribute to the progression and severity of the initial infection, as now the immune system cells responsible to mount a normal healing immune response are not able to do so because of the mitochondrial dysfunction. It is a bad, vicious cycle. Viral infections like HIV, hepatitis C, Epstein-Barr or chronic mono, and herpes viruses do that. And let's not forget Lyme disease. They have all been shown to directly target and affect the mitochondria. They create something called a mitochondriopathy, a disease of the mitochondria, or dysfunctional mitochondrial function. These chronic infections will also induce inflammation, further worsening the mitochondrial dysfunction, because the inflammatory response triggered by the initial infection will result in the release of many inflammation products, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and free radicals. They will further cause oxidative stress, which can damage the mitochondrial membrane and significantly interfere with the normal mitochondria function. And the damaged mitochondria will also release pro-inflammatory molecules, perpetuating this inflammatory chronic response, which will lead to serious tissue damage and chronic illness over time. How do you break that cycle? Well, you're probably going to have to see a Lyme disease specialist or someone that specializes in functional medicine to understand all these reverberations that the initial infection caused in your body, because it's no longer about eliminating that bacteria, that parasite, that virus. It's all about how your body's immune system has gone rogue and turned into something else, which is now affecting you in a negative way. Again, highly recommend the book called The Survival Paradox. What other things cause mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, obviously, lifestyle factors like lack of movement, poor diet, poor sleep will cause an imbalance in the cellular energy demand and supply, leading to a mitochondrial dysfunction. And keep in mind that mitochondrial dysfunction usually occurs as a result of a complex interaction between toxic environmental factors that I mentioned earlier, infections, stress, lifestyle issues, and genetic factors. For example, individuals carrying specific mutations like the MTHFR mutation might react very poorly to certain environmental triggers, toxins, etc. So any significantly increased cellular demand can actually overload and compromise the mitochondria in MTHFR mutation carriers. And nutrient deficiencies and aging obviously will cause and contribute mitochondrial dysfunction. But how does this whole mitochondrial dysfunction contribute to weight gain? It creates and perpetuates inflammation and will impair normal receptor function. The mitochondria produces energy, which is absolutely essential for the appropriate expression and activation of all the receptors that specific cell expresses on its membrane, like the fat cell, the muscle cell. Why is that important? Well, because the first of the two things I talked about earlier, the top thing that we keep coming back to is insulin and insulin resistance and the hormone balance and the complex interplay between all the body's hormones. All these hormones, including insulin, do not work if they fail to interact with their specific receptors. The cellular receptors are crucial. And please know that if your hormone receptors are broken, then the blood or the urine levels of your body's hormones could be great and optimal, but their specific actions throughout the body will be suboptimal, leading to an imbalance and a broken down metabolism, causing weight disturbance, weight gain, and possible obesity. As you can tell, understanding and uncovering the cause of weight gain and obesity, it's not simple at all. And it's a very complex issue requiring personalized approaches for any effective management and identification of the appropriate root cause. Most likely, you will need a team of people. For example, a functional medicine practitioner, a registered dietitian, a wellness coach, and ideally, they all will need to talk to each other about you. You will need an extensive battery of tests, some of them expensive and some of them not even covered by your medical insurance company. You will need to dedicate time and completely change your lifestyle in order for weight loss to be successful. In order for the chronic condition that is leading to whatever dysfunction is ailing you specifically to be reversed, you need to find a physician that is willing and has the time to dedicate hours of personal conversation looking into all the possible factors that cause these three things: inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and hormone receptor resistance. These three key things are not considered medical conditions, but they are the key issues leading to obesity, chronic illness, and likely cancer. If you suffer from chronic fatigue, you are achy and stiff. If you have foggy brain and poor memory, if you have anxiety, you feel depressed or overwhelmed by stress, if you have subtle digestive complaints or very obvious digestive complaints, if your sleep is disrupted, if you feel and know that something is wrong and you cannot put your finger on it, and last but not least, if you have been fighting weight gain with no success, then most likely you're suffering from inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and receptor disruption. Let's discuss just for a few minutes why our current medical system fails to address this weight problem. Well, number one reason is that most likely the physicians that are in your medical insurance network and accepting your medical insurance do not have the training or the know-how to uncover the root cause of your problem. Keep in mind that doctors and practitioners with the know-how and experience have spent lots of hours and tens of thousands of dollars getting educated in these matters. You should know that your medical insurance plan reimburses physicians or practitioners approximately $60 for a visit that's somewhere around 30 minutes. And that includes the moment you get checked in by the nurses and the time you spent with a physician and the time spent with the nurses at the end of the visit going over your orders and everything. You should also know that a visit that's 45 minutes will only pay about $120 or so. I know that you likely spend a lot more money on your monthly premiums if you live in the United States and you pay for your own insurance, but please know that money is not going to your physician or practitioners. I told you the system is broken, and that is a problem because you are the customer and you are not going to get the care that you deserve. And in order to get that care, you will now have to spend more thousands of dollars out of your pocket paying for a physician who's not willing to accept such meager payments from your medical insurance plan. Unfortunately, our medical system is not geared to support and reward either the physician or the patients that attempt to understand, uncover, and address the root cause of a problem, that being, for the purpose of this podcast, weight gain. But that applies to everything out there. If you expect to have your doctor discuss anything other than diet, exercise, maybe stress, and look at basic labs while you use your insurance plan, then you will be greatly disappointed. Your doctor might not even have the time to do an appropriate intake of information or understand what specific factors in your lifestyle actually impact and lead to these three key things I mentioned earlier: inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and receptor disruption. Most doctors don't even try because you would need multiple visits to start to understand what the problem is. Probably 5, 6, 7, 8 visits if they're all going to be 30 to 45 minutes. And the truth is, by the 5th or 6th visit, many months have now passed, and you, the patient, will be more frustrated than ever because we live in a century of convenience and we want everything super fast. So we're likely going to give up on the process, try something else. And this leads me to number 2, why I think our medical system fails to address the weight issue, is that our clients, the patients, expect immediate results, and many are looking for a magic pill or a magic shot. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint, but there is no magic pill to reverse weight gain. You need to uncover the problem that caused the weight gain for your specific situation. You need to find it, address it, reverse it, and then you'll reap the benefits: sustainable and permanent weight loss. Fixing the reason why you cannot lose weight is actually crucial, because if you think about all the 3 key things that I told you will lead to weight gain: inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and hormone receptor disruption, all these 3 together can unfortunately cause chronic illness, disability, ultimately leading to premature aging, poor quality of life, and possibly premature death and cancer. As a patient, you will need to invest the time, the money, and the dedication and commitment to make a meaningful change in your life that involves eating a different diet, changing your activity levels, changing your exercise, changing the supplements that you probably spend hundreds of dollars online because you read somewhere that they're good for you. Maybe changing your career and family dynamic and invest time and possibly more money in the stress management techniques like meditation, yoga, breathing exercises, Tai Chi, etc. It is a lot to take in, and all of these together do not consist a magic pill. On the contrary, it sounds like a lot of hard work. And that's maybe why the conundrum of weight gain has not been solved and we cannot lose weight. We're not motivated to look deep, dig deep, find the reason, address the reason, and achieve meaningful weight loss. I hope this podcast opens your mind to something different. You might have heard this information presented maybe differently by other wellness coaches or practitioners. You might have not heard it ever before. But I seriously hope that instead of being discouraged after listening to the podcast, you should feel more optimistic about uncovering the reason for weight gain in your case, or at least if this is affecting someone close to you that's suffering from weight gain. Can we address inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, and receptor disruption effectively? We certainly can. We just need to know where to start looking. I have met patients who, on a certain medical subject, know more than I do. These patients have spent many, many hours educating themselves, reading and learning about their specific condition. Thanks to the advent of the World Wide Web and so many podcasters that are willing to educate you, the listener, there is a ton of information at your fingertips. Maybe you've listened to a podcast, hopefully this podcast, and a light bulb went off in your brain. There's obviously so much more to say and talk about different ways we can address the serious epidemic of excess weight gain that we Americans suffer from. But I would like to close this podcast by asking you to please not chase the most recent fad or the most current magic drug that's out there, like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. These drugs will not fix the problem. They might instead make it worse, as there is a significant risk of irreversible gastrointestinal side effects that could damage and disrupt your gut barrier, causing more disruption and more inflammation. Please also be aware that all patients who discontinue the use of these drugs regain 2/3 or more of the weight they lost within 6 to 12 months from discontinuing the medication. These drugs are useful, but they are not a permanent solution. And please keep in mind, we do not have any data on the safety or long-term use of these drugs. I promise to come back and talk some more about this subject. But for now, stay safe, stay well, and stay tuned. Thank you for listening. If you liked the information you heard and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and follow my podcast. Should you find the content helpful to not just you, but possibly others, please share it and feel free to leave us a review. You are welcome to join the Facebook group, The Warrior Optimizing Wellness MD. I certainly hope that you've heard many things in this podcast that made you go, wow, I did not know that, or wow, I'd like to know more. So keep listening and I'll keep talking.